Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jesse, and in today's video, I'm doing a book unhaul. Probably the biggest book unhaul I've ever done. As we leave 2023, I'm wanting to leave behind some books as well. I want to leave them in 2023 and all the years before it. I just want to move on into a different era of my life. There are books on my shelves that I've just kept for silly reasons, whether it be nostalgic attachment. I was going to say other reasons, but I think it's mostly because of nostalgic attachment. I am, in fact, a nostalgic hoarder. If I have an object and it reminds me of like a specific memory, a specific time in my life, I will cling on to that. I feel like that's such a millennial thing too, to like be so attached to things that just like have nostalgic value. But I'm trying to work on my somewhat toxic attachment issues, and I'm working on that by bringing you this book unhaul today. I feel like I really romanticize the idea of going back to the time in my life when I didn't have a ton of unread books, and I would go out, buy a book from the bookstore, come home, and read that book. Obviously, in being a part of the book community, I lost control of my book buying habits, which is honestly, truthfully, not something I'm super proud of, but it happened. I accept that it happened. But also, in being a part of the book community, being a booktuber, it has just like opened me up to receiving a lot of free books, which is a hard thing to say no to. When somebody comes to you and they're like, here, do you want these free books? Yes, give it to me. So I don't truly ever see myself getting back to that, getting back to a place where like, I'm not getting 20 books within a month, but I would love to reduce that number. And maybe someday down the line, I will get back to that place that I keep romanticizing about. There are so many books that I pulled from my bookshelves, and yet I still feel like there are books up here that are in danger, that can easily be snatched up and yeeted out of here. So none of you are safe. Let's just be clear here. None of you are safe. We have a lot of books to go through. Let's get started. First up, we have here We Are the Wildcats. This is not even a book that I hated. In fact, I really had a good time reading it. We're following a varsity field hockey squad, and they're having a sleepover, and they're trying to figure out this mystery, and we get all the perspectives of all the girls, so it really shapes out all of the characters. And it takes place within a 24-hour time slot, which I love in books. It's like one of my favorite things is when a book takes place in 24 hours. I feel like it just offers up such rapid pacing, like you're never bored because it kind of has to keep things moving along in order to keep things interesting and in order to kind of fit in that 24-hour time slot. It's a book that I would recommend. It's just not a book that I like diehard loved. It didn't necessarily like stitch itself into my heart. Not that I want anything stitched into my heart because that sounds painful, but I'm just going to pass it on to somebody else who might enjoy it a lot more than I did. Next up, I have here Happily Ever Afters. I could not stand this book. And I felt like I was set up to love it because we were following a girl who is a writer and she is attending this writing program, and like just that concept alone, I was like, I love that. I love that we're following a writer, and I love that we're going to see her struggle and figure out her writing style and take from real life experiences and use that to help inspire her. But the things that go down, it's a no from me, darling. Mind you, I was a fan of the writing style, so at least it had that going for it, but the things that happen within this story, aka girly pop literally coming onto a man even though he was in a relationship, that just disrupted my entire enjoyment of this book. If you want a man, don't poach somebody else's man. It's not that complicated. In fact, it's rather easy. Also, I feel like this falls into that category where a character likes another character, but the reasons aren't reasoning. Like, you are not providing enough context as to why you like that person. In fact, it feels like you just like the idea of liking that person or wanting to be with that person. And that always really frustrates me because it's like, the reasons are not reasoning. Just admit that you like the idea of them and move on, please. Move on, move it or lose it. Next up here, we've got The Edge of Everything. I feel like I was in the minority for liking this book. I feel like this book came out at the wrong time. It's a paranormal romance, and it came out during a time when like paranormal romance was just like not having its moment anymore. People had kind of moved on from those kinds of books. But I really enjoyed it, and I felt like it was a breath of fresh air when it came out. Albeit, there were bits of it that I felt needed to be fleshed out a bit more. The main character has more chemistry with her best friend than the actual love interest, and some of the world building bits were just convoluted and confusing. But it was just one of those books that I couldn't help but be entertained by. It was super fun, and you might be wondering, why are you getting rid of it? And that's because I just have no desire to carry on with the series and read the next book. Even though it is only a duology, and all I would have to do is read the second book to bang out the duology. It's just been so long since I've read this book, and I feel like to move on to book 2, I would have to reread this, and that's not happening. There are other books that I want to read much more than this duology. So it's gotta go, Joe. Next up here, I've got Reverie. This book was a mess from beginning to end, and yet how was it so much fun? Honestly, the thing that made this book a winner and made it so interesting was the main antagonist. They're a drag queen, and the author brought their A game in writing that particular character. I almost wish that the story of Reverie would have been told through the eyes of the drag queen, because I feel like that that would have made this book much better than it was. And let's be clear, this book had a lot of issues in terms of just like overall storytelling. The world building was basically non-existent. I feel like after finishing it, I just had so many questions and I just had not fully wrapped my mind around the world of Reverie. It's very imaginative, but it just has no bones, and it's one of those things where it's like you kind of just have to suspend your disbelief the whole time, and if you're not able to do that, it's going to be a hard thing to enjoy, and I feel like that's something that I just really struggled with this book. I do want to pick up more books by this author because I've been hearing amazing things about the books that they've released since Reverie. Next up here, I've got Honey Girl. This is one of those it's me not you girl situations. I went in with specific expectations as to what I was going to get with this book. In fact, I thought it was going to be a romantic comedy because in this book we were following a girl who runs off to Vegas and she gets drunk and ends up getting married. So when you hear that, you immediately think, oh, it's going to be a romantic comedy kind of situation. But I got into the book and those expectations were not met. I did enjoy what this book delivered. It's focused around a millennial going through a life crisis, relatable. There's a podcast radio show element that was really enjoyable, and the relationship in this one is nice and wholesome. It's just not a book that I found myself becoming like a ride or die for, so I'm going to pass it on to somebody else. Next up here, I have Black Ice. This is a young adult thriller situation, and listen, back in the day, I thought this book was so fun. I devoured it. I was like, this is a great time. Is it as good as I thought it was back then? Absolutely not, and that's on character growth. I feel like the main character in this one just like continues to make bad decisions that set her up to be in a thrillery situation, and it's like, girl, get it together. What are we doing here? Why are we doing this? Let's stop doing this. Bye. Oh, I actually didn't mean to drop it like that. Next up, I'm getting rid of instructions for dancing. You know when you love an author's work and they come out with something that just does not hit in the same way that their other works hit, and you're absolutely devastated. That's the situation that happened with me in this book. I love Nicola Yoon's books. I loved Everything, Everything. I love The Sun Is Also a Star, but then this book came into my life and I was so utterly underwhelmed by it, and it makes me so sad. I'm not going to completely kick Nicola Yoon to the curb now, but I am going into her books now with my guard completely up. Next up, I'm getting rid of These Broken Stars. Now, this is actually one of the first sci-fi books that I ever read, and I feel like it was such a great sci-fi book for me to be reading at the time because it is like soft sci-fi. It's not too overwhelming when you get into it. I feel like a lot of the sci-fi that I've read or I've tried to read in the past, I get into it and it's just like so confusing. There's just too much going on. My brain just cannot compute the sci-fi-ness of the sci-fi book. And this one just is like soft sci-fi. I feel like there's not a huge plot happening, and the sci-fi-ness is just like vibes. I feel like I'm not explaining this very well, but like it makes sense to me, okay? I feel like it reminds me of like cozy fantasy. This is like cozy sci-fi or soft sci-fi. We should make that a thing. Soft sci-fi. That should be like the next trending genre. It will not be the next trending genre, but I would love for it to be the next trending genre because I feel like that would make it more accessible for us people who would like to get into sci-fi but just are completely overwhelmed by the world of sci-fi. I don't ever see myself reading the rest of the series, so it's getting dropped. Next up, I'm getting rid of Meet Cute. This is an anthology surrounding the trope Meet Cute. We've got stories from Jennifer L. Armentrout, Danielle Clayton, Cass Morgan, Nina LaCour, Nicola Yoon, Sarah Shepard, lots of notable authors. I really enjoyed this anthology. I feel like there was a lot of great stories. I feel like anthologies can be such a hit or miss situation, but for me, this one ended up being a hit, which again begs the question, why are you getting rid of this? I just don't feel the need to keep this book. I feel like I want somebody else to have a Meet Cute situation with it, so that's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna pass it on to somebody else and they're gonna fall in love with it. Hopefully. That actually is one that I could change my mind about in keeping or getting rid of. I should just get rid of it. There's just not a reason for me to hold on to it, even though I could see myself recommending it down the line. I'm getting rid of it. I'm getting rid of it. We're trying to just like let go of things. I loved it. It had its moment with me. Somebody else can love it. That was a close call. I almost talked myself into keeping it. Next up, I'm getting rid of The Lies About Truth by Courtney C. Stevens. I read this expecting to get the same flavor that Courtney C. Stevens typically delivers with her books, but it just did not match up. And that's not me saying that like I expect Courtney C. Stevens to deliver the same thing with every book. Like I don't expect that at all, but I felt like she was kind of trying to deliver that same thing that she normally delivers with her books. This kind of like heart-wrenching story with a really strong message that she wants to convey. Kind of this like life-altering situation happens and seeing the characters deal with that situation and how they learn and grow from that situation. Like that was kind of the setup for this book, and I feel like that's what I've gotten with a lot of the Courtney C. Stevens books that I've read, with Baking Normal and The June Boys. But I feel like what Courtney did great with those books is that like you were able to kind of feel the magnitude of the emotions of the situations that were happening, and you were also able to really connect and get invested in the characters characters because of the way that she fleshed them out. Whereas this one, I just felt like I was getting to know the characters on such a surface level, and I never really like felt the magnitude of this situation that happened. It's surrounding a car crash and this girl that loses one of her friends to the car crash. And I just feel like we didn't get enough time to really connect to those emotions and understand them in a way that we have with past Courtney books. So again, not an author that I'm kicking to the curb by any means. I still think Courtney C. Stevens is one of the most underrated authors out there. This one just did not do the thing that I wanted it to do, and I want to just pass it on. Next up, I'm getting rid of the Embassy Row trilogy. I read this trilogy a few years back, and it is such a fun time, but let me be clear here. This trilogy is so unhinged. If you've read it, you know. Like, the things that go down in this book, absurd. Chaos, madness, what in the hell is going on? I don't ever see myself revisiting these books, and I just don't know when I will ever be like highly recommending them, because like I do recommend them if you're looking for just chaos and unhinged behavior, all around unhinged behavior. That is the only situation in which I would be recommending these books. For me, they were just like books where like you get in, you get a little taste, and you want more. You just like can't help but want to keep reading. You want to find out what happens next. Even if every page, every chapter, you ask yourself, why am I still reading this? It's just time to part ways with this trilogy and pass it on to somebody else. I had my fun with it, now I'm gonna let somebody else have fun with it. Next up, I'm getting rid of 100 Sideways Miles. I pulled up my old YouTube review for this book, and I wanted to die of the cringe I felt. I just like cannot watch my old videos. And maybe someday I will be able to, like maybe when I'm an old grandpa man, I will be able to look back on my videos with like proud eyes, but like right now I'm just like, you are so cringe. Please turn off the camera. Please delete this video from the internet. Did I delete the video from the internet? No, I did not. It's still up on my channel if you want to watch it, but I am just so glad that I'm not who I was. I've changed a lot. I feel like I'm better at this, a little bit better at this. I get a little bit better every year, just a little bit. I show a little bit of growth, and it's just so hard looking back on that person. Anyway, the reason I'm getting rid of this book is just because I didn't love it. I have such a weird relationship with books by Andrew Smith. I always enjoy them for the most part, but there's also just like a lot of issues within his books. I feel like one of my main issues with this book was like the female character just like being there and just like not having any kind of personality. And it felt like he just was like, I guess I need to have a female in there just to like have a female in there just so I can get like my female count quota in there. And I feel like I've noticed that a lot with Andrew Smith books, is that like he doesn't do the best in terms of writing female characters. I feel like I also should be getting rid of the Winger books by Andrew Smith, because there are a lot of issues within these books, but like there's something about these books that I just cannot let go of, and I don't understand. I feel like he hinted at a third book coming out eventually for this, and it's not happened yet, and it's been years and years and years, so I should just part ways with these, but I need to think on it a little bit more. I don't know what's tying me to them, because I know that there's a lot of issues within these books, like a lot of problematic issues, but yet I'm still just like so entertained by them, so I don't know. I need to like really just have a heart-to-heart with myself and just let go of them, but I'm gonna hold on to them for a little bit longer. Alexa, play A Little Bit Longer by Nick Jonas. Next up, I'm getting rid of A Wrinkle in Time. I've read this book like 3 times in my lifetime, which is 3 times too many. I read it as a kid, and I did not understand it as a kid, and then I've read it twice as an adult, and both times that I've read it as an adult, I still was confused by it. It's a book that just like makes me feel dumb. I just had such a hard time wrapping my mind around it. And I think I've always had that desire to read this book and to have it click, which is why I've held on to it. I'm like, maybe someday I will read this book and I'll just have that aha moment. But like, I'm not gonna keep rereading this book in order to have that aha moment. Like, I've read it 3 times, let's pump the brakes and get rid of it. I need to stop being stubborn and just let it go. It's hard for me though, I'm a stubborn boy. Next up, I'm getting rid of Food Girls and Other Things I Can't Have. This book was incredibly important to me at the time that I read it. As somebody who has always had body image issues and has had a weird relationship with food, I've always felt a little uncomfortable in having those issues, because growing up in the gender that I am, I feel like there's always been like a stigma about being open about having issues like that as a man. And when I read this book, it was the first time that I had been exposed to a character that was a male and was having the same issues that I was having, and I felt very comforted by that, and I felt very seen. But I know if I were to revisit this book today, that there would be like a lot of problematic issues surrounding it, and I, again, can't like fully 100% say that that's the case. Obviously, I would have to reread this book in order to know if it did use problematic language, if there were like problematic issues within the story. But like, from what I can recall from my memory, I feel like just in general, the way that the main character talks about their issues might not be the best. And then also like, I remember the romance within this book, I feel like is something else that I could see there being problems with. But again, I'm not going to reread this book, so I can't like 100% confirm those things. But I feel like I just have such a different mind than I did at the time reading this book, and I feel like if I were to read it now, with the eyes that I have now, with the mind that I have now, that I would just have such a different experience with it. I'm not labeling it problematic, I could just see myself probably having issues with this book if I were to read it now. Next up here, we've got Special Topics in Calamity Physics. I hated every second of this book. I feel like it was The Secret History, but tweaked a bit. It was very much so, can I copy your homework, but just adjust the answers a little bit? That's how it felt the whole time I was reading it. The writing style was a situation where it was just like so wordy, like way too wordy. It was like, oh my god, over-explained, over-descriptive, too much. And because of that, it caused the pacing to get into like snail territory, where it just was like moving so slowly, way too slowly. Just not for me. Next up here, I've got Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I feel like I'm in the minority with this one. It just did not win me over, but I know that like so many people loved this book. Mind you, when I was in it, I felt the book's potential, but I also just like couldn't help but just feel like everything was underdeveloped and the plot was not plotting, and that was aggravating to me. It landed in that territory for me where it was like, this is a bad book disguised with a beautiful cover. I said what I said, and I'm sorry, but I'm also not sorry. For me, I just needed things to be fleshed out a lot more. It felt very surface level, and I am ready for it to get on out of here, even though it's beautiful. Like, I love this cover, but like, it's gotta go. Next, I'm getting rid of The Forsaken. This one has had a nostalgic chokehold on me for years and years and years. This dropped during the dystopian bang, and it had a lot of potential. It just didn't come swinging through with the execution. There was a major lack of emotional depth with the characters, and then also I felt like it was trying too hard to replicate what other dystopian books have done, instead of trying to do something different and stand out amongst the rest. Be gone. Next up, I'm getting rid of My Heart and Other Black Holes. There was once a time when I loved this book so deeply, but it's just one of those books where I feel like if I were to read it today, I would have such a different experience with it. And this goes back to like just having such a different mindset now when I go into books. I've grown and changed and evolved over time, and so I just like look at things differently. I approach text differently, and I just feel like I would have a different experience with this book now, one that's not necessarily a positive experience. I still appreciate this book for what it was and who I was when I read it, but I also just don't have the desire to revisit this book and to see how I feel about it as a grown person. I'm getting rid of The Fifth Wave, you guys. I feel like, again, this is another situation where I was just like holding on to it for nostalgic reasons. When I first read this book, I really enjoyed it, and then the second book came out and I was like so devastated by how bad of a turn the series took, which made me question if I even liked The Fifth Wave, which I think I did like The Fifth Wave when I first read it, but I don't know if it was as good as I remembered, or if I was like trying to convince myself that it was good, you know? Like, I just was having one of those situations. And I don't want to like warp my experience of this book. Like, obviously I want to look back with fond memories of The Fifth Wave and the fact that I enjoyed this first book, but I also just don't know if it was as good as I thought it was back in the day. This book has just been sitting on my shelves for so long, and I have no desire to read the rest of the books, and I just don't feel like the need to keep this first book, so I'm gonna let it go. Go find a new owner. That sounded harsh. Go find somebody who will love you. I'm done with this. Okay, to wrap this unhaul up, I'm going to be going through 4 different stacks of books that all have like the same reason as to why I'm getting rid of them. And so instead of going over each and every title and explaining each and every thought that I have in getting rid of them, I'm just going to go through the stacks. The first stack I have here is the books I hated stack, which is pretty self-explanatory. I did not like any of these books, and so it's time to just get them on out of here. Get this negativity off my bookshelves. Get this negative energy out the door. Let's go through the stack. We've got At the End of the Matinee, This Is Where It Ends, Family of Liars, that sequel prequel situation did not need to happen, XOXO, A Magic Steeped in Poison, The Atlas 6. I'm sorry, all you Atlas 6 lovers. Amy and Roger's Epic Detour. I feel like that's a very well-loved book, but it just didn't work for me. It just did not hit for me. And The Cartographers. The next stack makes me sad because these are just books that I've lost interest in, and I just have no desire to read anymore. First up we have here It Came from the Sky, Somewhere Only We Know, Magic for Liars, This Time Will Be Different, Seven Deadly Shadows, I'll Be the One, The Way You Make Me Feel, I Believe in a Thing Called Love, and The Jasmine Throne. At one point, I really wanted to read these books, but the desire just did not stick, and so I'm going to move on. Next, I have here book series that I'm not going to finish, and I don't want to keep the books that I have from the series on my shelves, which honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's time. Where is it at? I didn't have this book included in the stack, but I want to include it now because I just need to let it go. I found it. Let's go through the books. The one that I just grabbed is Rebel Belle. I loved the first book, but the series just went downhill. Winter's Orbit was really fun. I just have no desire to carry on. Reign the Earth, Aragon, Love Boat Taipei. I loved Love Boat Taipei, but I just feel like I have changed so much since I've read that book that I just feel like I'm gonna hate read books 2 and books 3. Also, I just did not see that book needing sequels at all. Fallen Kingdoms, the Otherworld trilogy, Grim Lovelies, Sea Fire, and The Unbroken. This is such a freaking heavy stack. I really am getting rid of so many books. And the crazy thing is that there's more that I want to get rid of. Like, I'm already thinking of other books that I want to get rid of. I'm probably not going to do another book unhaul video, but like, maybe I should. The last stack of books that I have here is books that I like, but I just have no desire to keep. They served their purpose in my life, and now it's time to move on and pass them on. We've got Windfall, One of the Boys, The Voting Booth, Panic, The You I've Never Known, When You Were Here, Bull, Voices, and Before I Let Go. I should count how many books I'm getting rid of. Okay, I tallied up all the books, and that is 59 books that I'm getting rid of. The thing is, I want to get rid of more. Like, as I'm doing this unhaul, I'm like thinking of other books that I'm like, oh, I should really be getting rid of that. There's a few that are like on the chopping block. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get rid of the Gilded Wolves trilogy. I really loved the first book. The second book was not so great, and I just have not had the desire to read the third and final book, even though I love those characters so freaking much. The Bear and the Nightingale trilogy, I've been thinking about that because I've had those books for so freaking long and I've just never had the push to read them. And I don't know if one of you guys wants to like push me to read them, but those books are on the chopping block. There's even some special edition books that I have that I'm considering getting rid of. Like I have Red Queen and Glass Sword. Those two books, they're special editions. And like I like the Red Queen series, but like I just don't know that I care to have the special editions. I don't know what's happening to me, but I'm just like in the mood to just like purge all my books, just get rid of all of them. I don't think I'll be doing another unhaul anytime soon, but I am still processing a lot of these books and figuring out if I want to get rid of more. I feel like I will probably get rid of more because I just feel like this is such a freeing experience. Like getting rid of these books just like makes me feel so much better. Like I already have like a weight lifted off. The only thing that I really hate about unhauling books, and this is so stupid, is that it creates a problem with like book organization and like organizing my bookshelves. Like it's so hard to organize them when there's like so many books missing now. So that's gonna be a thing that I'm gonna have to work through and get through. I can do it. I believe in myself. So dramatic. You guys should let me know down below in the comments if you are planning to do an unhaul before the end of the year. I personally recommend doing it. I know that unhauls are not for everybody. I know that some people look at the books they read as like a trophy of some sort, which I totally understand. I've been there before. I still struggle in getting rid of books, but like I also feel the benefit. Like right after getting rid of them, right after pulling these books off my shelves, I'm like, oh, I feel so free. I feel like I can take on the world. If you like this video, be sure to go and hit that like button. If you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe or go and hit that bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope your day is bright, that tomorrow is brighter. Keep reading what your heart desires, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye, yo! This book has just been shitting.